From Hollywood, it's the Tom Leykis Show.
Oh, God.
And now, here he is, Tom Leykis.
Thank you for tuning into the Tom Leykis Show. This is where America gets together to talk about the issues you really care about. It's a different kind of a radio talk program. We're the radio talk show that is not hosted by a right-wing wacko or a convicted fella. No. I am your host. Write down our telephone number. You're going to need it. It's 1-800-5800-TOM. 1-800-5800-866. Thank you for tuning in. We're doing something that we rarely do. We are devoting our entire program to an article that I read, and many of you sent this in, by the way. Many of you saw it and sent it to us. Called Child Man in the Promised Land by Kay Hymowitz. She's the editor of City Journal. And by the way, Kay, where is City Journal located? What is it?
City Journal is a publication of the Manhattan Institute, which is a public policy think tank in New York City. And by the way, I'm not the editor. I'm a contributing editor, slightly different.
Okay. Well, as I've told you, with the various edits that are done on your piece, I don't know if you've seen them all. Various things get cut out or truncated. And so you never know if you're getting the whole piece or all the information. Very nice. All right, this piece, for people who haven't seen it, you can go to our website, blowmeuptom.com, and we link right through to the City Journal website, and you can read it for yourself if you like. It talks about people who are a lot like the people who listen to this show. And so the question becomes this. You talk in this piece about men being perpetual adolescents and not growing up, as you put it. But if guys want to live a life of playing basketball and video games and hanging out with their buddies and having a few drinks, if they're responsible enough to show up at work every day and pay their bills and not impregnate others, what's wrong with that?
Well, you know, there are a couple of answers I would give to that. One is, what happens if we have lots of guys doing that, lots of very smart and lovely, talented guys who are doing that? That's a lot of people who are not helping to create the next generation, caring for the next generation. You know, I think of adulthood this way. It's not just that you become a self-sufficient working person who can, you know, buy their own home or at least provide shelter and food and that sort of thing, but that you're also taking an interest in the future of your society and thinking about, you know, what contribution you can make. Now, the vast majority of people decide that contribution is going to be through children. Some people don't do it that way, but they are thinking about what it is that they want to give back to, especially in our case, I think, to a society that's been very, very good to many of us.
Now, I have said on this program, and I'm going to completely be straight with you and not, because I really want to take this very seriously, because our show uses a lot of irony, a lot of sarcasm, and frankly,
I can do that too, Tom.
No, I understand that, and frankly, if we do it right, it's generally pretty crude, because you know what kind of stuff guys like. You know that from the piece you wrote. So, but I'm going to be straight with you. When I talk to the guys on the radio about marriage, I say that marriage is for the poor and dumb. They're going to continue to crank out Xerox copies of themselves. There'll be plenty of children in the future. Why should someone who's intelligent, has money, has potential, has a career, why should they spend their resources on something like that?
And your idea is that the best way to spend your resources is on giving yourself pleasure.
Absolutely, and why not?
Well, I'm not saying that one shouldn't spend some money on giving themselves pleasure, but is that, you know, what are you leaving behind? What kind of life are you defining for yourself? What kind of meaning are you defining for yourself? You're saying that's enough for you. You're saying that's life as you want to live it.
That's enough for a lot of guys.
Huh?
That's enough for a lot of guys.
It may be for a lot of guys. I actually don't believe that it's that enough for most guys.
It was enough that you had to write this piece. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that this is.
Now wait a minute. minute, Tom. Most of the child men will marry, and I said that at the end. Most of them will marry, and they will have kids. That's what tends to happen in this world, despite the existence of child men in their 20s and 30s.
Yes, but by the same token, if a guy waits until he is a doctor, is a lawyer, is an architect, has a practice, has money, has funds, buys himself a house, he has insured himself against divorce, where a woman can't take his house away, where a woman cannot take half of his law practice or half of his architectural practice, where a woman cannot take what he has. And on top of that, and in the way we would normally say it on the program, if you wait till 35, 40 to get married, you can still marry a 23-year-old.
Well, you're really confirming what I wrote, or rather the inspiration behind my piece, which is that women are pretty unhappy with you child men, and you can see why. In other words, here you are at age 40 having a good old time, and they're looking for husbands, and where are you? You're looking at the 23-year-old.
Right. Well, then, again, it's should I be making myself available to some woman to start dipping into my bank account or taking up space in my home for tchotchkes and knickknacks?
No, but what kind of companionship do you want in life? Do you want to have just a trophy wife who, will look pretty and young and make you feel young?
I've gotten beyond the desire for a trophy wife. My companionship is my friends, my guy friends. That's my companionship. Women are not there for companionship or conversation. They are there to provide, whether it be arm candy or sexual pleasure or occasional entertainment. As I said, I have a stripper pole in my home. And then the rest of the time, if I need to talk about politics or books or the election, I talk to my guy friends about that.
Well, I don't know exactly what to say to that, except, again, I think that if you look at the surveys, if you of young people, what do they want, what do they look forward to in life, they do expect to find companionship with the opposite sex. And, you may be the exception to the rule, and you sound like a very bitter man.
Well, it's not that I'm a bitter man, because, in fact, I as I tell the audience, I'm the happiest I've ever been today. I have been through divorces. I had prenups, so I didn't get dinged too badly, and I didn't have children, so I didn't get dinged too badly. And I'm not an alimony payer, and I don't believe in alimony. And so from that standpoint, I don't really have a lot to be bitter about. I'm on good terms with the people I was married to in the past. I just don't see why I should be appropriating my resources to them.
Yeah. Well, again, as I said, I think that for most people, they look forward to some kind of strong, very powerful connection to someone of the opposite sex. I think that's true for men and women. They may not want it now if they're 25. They may not want it when they're 28 or 30, even for that matter. But it is a goal for most people, and I think most people want to have children. You said very clearly you do not. But I think,
But even if I did, I wouldn't marry somebody to have children, and the reason I wouldn't do it is because if the marriage didn't work out, I would have to pay alimony.
Well, you're going to have to pay,
you don't have to pay alimony.
We can talk about the laws, that alimony laws, and perhaps there's an argument that we want to change them. Although I'm not sure I would agree with you for reasons we could go into later.
And I also don't believe in handing over my resources that I've worked to create all these years. I've created this radio program. I have a number of service marks that I've registered. I own a business. I don't want to run the risk I'm going to have to hand them over, or 50% of them over, to somebody else.
Well, as you know, there are ways to avoid that these days, and many men do get prenups.
And some women do, but I don't know how many women you've dated, Kay, but I can tell you that women are very, very negative towards prenups for the most part. Very few of them are willing to sign prenups.
Right. Well,
unless they have more than I have.
Yeah. Well, they see it as you're trying to deprive them and not trusting them, and which you don't.
well, and as I always say, it's not a matter of whether I trust them. I don't trust judges and attorneys who generally make these determinations.
Yeah.
And in New York State, where you live, it's pretty severe.
Look, Tom, what you're describing, I think, is a very sad situation of the relations between the sexes, and I'm getting a big, big dose of this in the email that I'm getting from my readers. There is, and on both sides, women and men. The women are completely disgusted with the men that they're meeting. They find them immature. They find them unwilling to commit. I mean, you can see why. They find them self-involved. And unable to really carry on a relationship. But, in a way, what you're saying is, well, yeah, we can't because we're not interested in relationships. That's what you're saying. And, if you have women who are still interested in you, which I suspect you do because you have a lot to offer them.
because people love to walk into a bakery, even if they can only smell the bread.
Well, okay, but do you like being liked for something like that? Is that what you want to be?
It's part of it. Yes, you know why? Because it's part of who I am. It is a quantifiable representation of everything I've accomplished.
All right, and then,
it's like being liked for other accomplishments, like liked for being an artist, liked for being an author, liked for being the winner of the strongman competition.
How about for being you? Have you ever had anybody like you for that?
My money is part of who I am.
It is part of it, Tom, but you do know that a lot of women are interested in the money and not you.
That's perfectly okay because I'm interested in getting them naked and not interested in having a conversation with them, so it's a fair deal.
Well, you're right. It is a fair deal if that's the way you want to treat people.
Now, let me ask you another question here, because you talk in this article as you're trying to make your case that men are perpetual adolescents about the kind of entertainment that men enjoy, whether it be movies with Adam Sandler and Jim Carrey or certain kinds of TV shows, what have you. No mention in here of the kind of television programming or movies that women enjoy. There's the implication that women are interested in serious novels and serious film and serious theater. But who is watching shows like The Insider, Entertainment Tonight, Extra, anything that has to do with Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan? Who is reading and consuming all of that material?
You couldn't be more correct. I totally agree with you. I think that both women and men in this culture are very attracted to trash.
Why would I discuss the political ramifications of 2008 with somebody who's more concerned about whether Britney Spears is in rehab than she is about when the primary is taking place?
Well, if that's the only kind of women that you're meeting, I would suspect that you're looking in the wrong places, or maybe for the wrong quality.
Well, then I go ahead to tell you something I also tell the listeners, and that is the more attractive a woman is, generally, the less likely it is that she knows who's running for president.
Well, I don't know. I've never done the kind of research you have, Tom, on this.
I've been doing in-the-field research.
Yes.
I'm an amateur anthropologist.
And I don't profess to be much of a beauty myself, but I certainly know very beautiful women who do know who's running for president and are extremely good conversationalists.
Yeah, but it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
There's
just not a lot of those out there.
I think it's the haystack you're looking in.
You really think so? So you're telling me there are a bunch of 9s and 10s out there who are anxious to get into a conversation with whether McCain is going to beat Clinton?
Well, I think there probably are some. I don't know how many there are.
Not
and I
many.
Think if you're really that focused on the external only, you can make no compromises as far as the 10 factor goes. Then you may have a problem.
But here's the deal: when men are rich and successful, they don't have to be radio personalities. They can be doctors, lawyers, what have you. They can afford the youngest, hottest women out there.
If that's what they're looking for, but those marriages will not last.
I mean, let's be realistic. There's a reason the pictures of Pierce Brosnan's wife are such a news story. And that is because guys who look like Pierce Brosnan and have the money, power, and fame of Pierce Brosnan are never with women that look like that.
Yeah.
That's why it's a news story.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that is the Darwinian way, isn't it? Right? It is, you do look for
water seeks its own level. I say it all the time.
Exactly, but you also have to realize that you're living in a very complex world that in which people generally want more than just that kind of connection.
I know. By the way, I know women I love to talk about politics with I just wouldn't want to see them naked.
Well, and it sounds like you won't. So I hope for their sake you do not.
I hope for my sake I do not. We'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll take some calls for our guest, Kay Hymowitz. She's contributing editor for City Journal, and we will continue with your telephone calls momentarily.
Tom Leykis.
It's the Tom Leykis Show. At 1-800-5800-TOM. Our guest, Kay Hymowitz, is contributing editor to City Journal. She's based in Brooklyn, New York, and she wrote the piece we are talking about called Child Man in the Promised Land. And it seems to talk an awful lot about the kind of guys who like listening to this program that we do here. The article is linked on our website, blowmeuptom.com. If you're near a computer, take a look. Run it up your iPhone. See what she's saying, and you can jump right in here at 1-800-5800-TOM. Let's continue our conversation now with our callers at 1-800-5800-TOM. Tim on the Tom Leykis Show. Hello.
Hello, Tom.
Hello, Tim.
How are you doing? And yes, I do care.
Doing great.
Kay, I had a couple questions for you. I noticed you said you have 2 daughters. Are they your only kids?
No, I have a son.
You have a son, too?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any grandchildren?
I wish.
That's exactly what I was gathering from the article.
You think you know what's driving my article.
Yeah, it just seems like you're kind of bitter that nobody's taking care of your daughters for you. It seems like you're kind of hoping one of us successful guys with our stuff together wants to give them that little, white picket fence and those babies that you've been waiting for them to have.
Well, I prefer we didn't get to speculate about my motives on this. It is true that I tend to, because I have children of a certain age, I tend to become curious about the world they're living in. My girls are not looking for somebody to give them that picket fence. I mean, they would like to find a good relationship, like most young people would like to find a good relationship. And I actually, as I said earlier in the show, wasn't so much driven by their own experiences as the experience of some slightly older women in their 30s, and also just the general sense you get from websites, from TV shows like or shows like Sex and the City, that there is this problem between the sexes. I'm going over my email during our breaks and just staggered by the kind of poisonous bitterness that I hear on both sides, men and women, towards each other. So clearly we are not on the same wavelength here, men and women, and I think that at the very least this article is bringing that out in the open.
1-800-5800-TOM. Catherine on the Tom Leykis Show. Hello.
Hey, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Hey, Kay, I have to say thank you, first of all, for that bit of research. That was really great in compiling all that information. I'm a researcher myself, and I think that's a really brilliant work that you put together. But I have to side with Tom. I obviously think that there's a lot missing in the marriage paradigm right now. It's not serving society well as a whole, and it needs to be redone or just put to the side like most men have figured out right now. I'm a successful woman at 25. I'm in an open relationship with someone who agrees a lot with what Tom has to say, and it's been wonderful. It's much better than the pre-marriage relationships that most people wanted to have with me in my early 20s, and I think that a lot is being said about going into marriage and popping out kids in a society where there's way too many kids already.
There are not way too many kids. We have a society that's actually going to have a real, what they call a demographic disequilibrium. That is, we're going to have far too few workers to sustain the kind of life that people expect now for retirees and so on and so forth. And so I think there's a real question about your assumption that there are not enough kids. But aside from that, I think one of the things that maybe I should lay out on the table is I do most of my writing, or a lot of my writing, about marriage. It's a key interest of mine. And I do think that there is, as you say, Catherine, there is something problematic about the marriage paradigm for a lot of people now. And I think one of those things is that we expect too much. The kind of companionship that Tom wants, for instance, from a woman should not be in the form of marriage. I think marriage's primary purpose is to provide a consistent male figure for children. I mean, that to me is its purpose. It's lost that's purpose because we try to make it mean so many other things. So I would agree with you that, I don't think marriage is for everybody, but I do think it is for people who want to have kids. All of the research that I've looked at suggests that it is better arrangement for children and for the next generation, and that's kind of a basic assumption from where I'm coming from.
Well, all right there. I could continue to argue against that, but I think I'll let the other callers take a whack at it, too.
All right, Catherine.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Appreciate the call. I noticed no mention of race in your piece that I recall, and your piece really struck me as being about Caucasian men and Caucasian women. But let's take a look at African Americans for a second. 2/3 of all births in the African American community are out of wedlock.
Right. Actually, I do mention race in the very, very beginning. I am talking about white guys and white middle-class guys. Because you're quite right, there are racial disparities here. About 70% of children, of black children today, are born to unmarried mothers. The large majority of those children will have either inconsistent or negligible relationships with their fathers. We simply do not know a way to provide close relationships between fathers and children without the institution of marriage. It's never happened. As far as I can see, it will never happen. If you want to have a close relationship with your children, you will stay married as much as is possible. You will marry and stay married to their mother.
Of course, look around. The role models, the women that women look up to in this society are the women who say, I'm going to go to Africa and adopt, or I'm going to have children whether I'm married or not, because who needs a man? Who needs a father?
Those numbers are still very, very small, Tom. Catherine referred to my research before, and these are numbers that I'm, looked at fairly carefully. The vast majority of women who are having children without being married are low income. And from my understanding of what's happening there, they are really limiting the chances of the life chances of their children by doing that. And they are not providing men with any role to play, in any strong social role to play. So I think that's very problematic. The women you're talking about, the ones that are going to Africa to adopt children, by the way, I have no problem with that. Those are children who need homes, and I think whoever wants to adopt them, whatever decent person wants to adopt them, it's fine. But the people who are actually creating children, we do know that the relationships that those kids will have with their fathers is very, very complicated by the lack of marriage.
Yes. And, of course, the laws allow women to, or at least the judges allow women frequently to skip town, move to another state with the kid, collect child support checks without ever reporting their whereabouts. Yeah. If you go to one of these websites of these male rights organizations, which you may find distasteful, you will see countless stories of men who are pouring tens of thousands of dollars of money they've earned into lawyers and child support checks and attempts to find the kids through private investigators, what have you. And women are given wide berth to just disappear with the kid and never be seen again and just collect that cash.
I think that is a terrible problem, and I'm well aware of the misery of men who have been left or feel that they've been left and whose children have been taken away from them, and I think it is a tragedy. And I'd like. So
it doesn't make it very appealing to take that kind of risk.
Yeah. Well, you said that before, and I wanted to ask you. You've been divorced at least twice, from what I gather.
4 times.
4 times. Excuse me. so you have developed a certain, through experience, certain ideas about what's possible in the
what's possible and what marriage really is, which is a contractual arrangement in which you form a corporation with somebody that is approved by the Secretary of State of your state with the raised seal of the Secretary of State that's placed on there before that marriage certificate is returned to you after you get married, in which you are agreeing to put in half of everything you earn, which for stay-at-home moms is frequently nothing or negligible. And then at the end of things don't work out, mom can simply open the vault and take half or more of everything a man has earned.
All right. Well, let me get back to my point, which is that I don't think that young men in their 20s and probably even in their early 30s who have never been married are thinking the way you're describing.
I don't agree, and I got to tell you why. I've been doing this show in this form now for 11 years. And we've been talking about these issues with young men every day for hours, every day. They do think about that. And here's why they think about it. Because we have the first generation of adult men who are raised by single mothers. Yeah. They've seen divorce. Yeah. Even though they may not have been married themselves or may not have the bitterness of past experience by getting married, they have seen what divorce is all about. This is why the median age of marriage for men continues to go up. It's because they have been victims of divorce as children.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about one thing. That is that the divorce culture that started in the late 60s and really took off in the 70s has been very damaging to young people's feelings and about the possibilities of marriage. However, statistically, the children of divorce are, though they are more likely to divorce themselves, they often don't tend to avoid marriage. They often marry actually rather early. I think, I would guess, because they're hoping to provide for themselves what their parents have taken away. That is a stable family.
And what are the divorce statistics for people who marry young?
Oh, they're high. Depends what you mean by young.
80%?
No. Oh, no. Well, it depends what you mean.
If you get married before age 21.
Well, yes, before 21, but by the time you get to about 25, those rates don't seem to differ that much from somebody at 30 or 35.
Right, and 25 is an age that I give men. I say, if you insist on getting married, why get married before 25? Why even have a serious relationship before age 25?
I think that marriage before 25 is a little bit risky. Depends on the kid, and if it were my kid, I'd be sort of wondering and a little worried about it. But what happens, I think, is once you get past 25 and the years go on and on and on, and you're in and out of serial relationships, you have gone through many breakups, you've experienced a lot of the bitterness of a kind of divorce in many cases, because many young people have multi-year relationships that are fairly serious, but for various reasons they break up. I think that adds to a sense of bitterness and a lack of confidence about the future that really is very damaging to marriage.
I just happen to believe that people should have confidence in themselves. They should feel good about living alone. They should feel good about being with themselves. And they should feel good about having a home that is theirs, where they don't get told not to put their feet up, or they can't watch football, they can't have a flat screen in the living room, or all the various things that men are getting tired of being told.
Well, I don't agree. I think that we are social creatures. We want that kind of stability. We want those kinds of stable, long-term relationships. Human beings have always desired those things, sought ways to define themselves through their relationships, through their families, and I don't think that will ever go away.
All right, we'll see what the public thinks as we continue our conversation with Kay Hymowitz. She is contributing editor to City Journal.
Tom Leykis. 1-800-5800.
1-800-5800-TOM is our telephone number. We are joined by Kay Hymowitz, contributing editor to City Journal. And she has authored a piece that we've been talking about called Child Man in the Promised Land. Your telephone calls continue here at 1-800-5800-TOM. If you'd like to read the piece, go to blowmeuptom.com. We have linked right through to the City Journal website, and you can read the piece for yourself and then jump right in. Let's say hello to Tim. Tim is in Portland, Oregon, home of the Other White Meat on the Tom Leykis Show. Hello.
Hello, Father. How you doing?
Son, I'm doing great.
Fantastic. Hey, Kay, how you doing today?
Fine.
Good. Hey, Tom, I definitely agree with your side. I'm 41, been married almost 10 years to my wife. We've got 3 kids, and both me and my wife say it all the time. If we had to do it over again, we would not have kids so that we can go out and live the Tom Leykis lifestyle. So we can go out and drink when we want, travel when we want, and do the things that we want to do when we want to do them. Kids take a lot of money out of your pocket. Marriage is extremely difficult and very tiring being with the same person after just even a few years. My wife would agree to the same thing. We have this conversation, like I said, on a fairly regular basis. But we stay together strictly for our kids. And that's the biggest reason. But, you know, when our kids are 18, who knows what's going to happen? My guess is we'll probably end up getting divorced just because it's just too tough. And it takes too much out of your pocketbook. You know, would love to have the big house and be able to leave whenever I want, and so would my wife. But as I said, it's just too tough and you can't do it. We both are working professionals. We work our butts off. But again, my wife has said it. You know, it wouldn't happen if we had to go back in hindsight and do it all over again. She wouldn't even do it again. It's just not worth it.
Oh, can I? Well, I'd like to respond to that, of course.
Sure.
You know, look, this is a big country with many individuals having all sorts of different experiences. And I admit, having raised 3 children of my own, that there are many times you want to bolt and just get out. I mean, it's really tough and expensive and all the things you're saying. But, you know, it's still a question of what do you want to leave behind you? What kind of life do you want to live? What matters in your life? You're saying, Tom, and I think your caller is saying, well, maybe what really matters is just my pleasure, you know, is that I have a good time. And I just don't think that you get to a later age and you look back and say, you know what was really great about my life? It's that I had a lot of women and I had a big house. And I don't think that's what people look back on and think really matters. I think they think about their families. I think they think about their kids. They think about their the deeper relationships and the more powerful experiences they've had. And I just, you know, there's no way to convince anybody of that out there, I guess. But that's my view of what. Well,
I guess, Kay. But you know, my kids are a joy, and I do take some enjoyment out of them and watching them grow up in the things that they do. But you know, in the long run, it's just a huge struggle. It's extremely tiring. Working professional, putting in a ton of hours, trying to grow my career. I could have grown my career a lot faster without being tied down, without having kids, because I can't move because my kids are in one of the best school systems out here. And I can't just pick up and move because I've got to think of them first. Unfortunately, not my career, which holds me back, which holds my wife back. If I want to pick up and go to Napa Valley in California to go do a wine tour some weekend with my wife, we can't. You
mean like I do?
Yeah, Tom, exactly.
Well, you know what? You will be able to do that.
When you're very old, Tim, you'll wheel yourself around the Napa Valley.
I've got one foot in the grave and the other one's on the walker.
You'll have your life alert in one hand, and you'll be there in the gurney, and they'll be wheeling you into Barringer. It's going to be very exciting.
Now, Tom, you have to be more polite to your guest here. Do I sound that correct?
No. I'm talking about what Tim is going to sound like when he gets to go to the Napa Valley.
That way either. You'd be surprised. You know, we stay healthy a long time these days and have a lot of fun after the kids leave. There's no question. You know, by the way, you know, there's a lot of research to support what Tim is saying. I'm sad to say that, you know, people do find time with their children is very much a drag. But, you know, again, so you could have had a better career. I mean, you know, you are going to have...
But again, Kay, what kind of life is it for my kids? I mean, I work 12 to 16-hour days. My wife puts in, 10 to 12-hour days. Our kids are at daycare. They see us for a couple hours at night. We shush them, go through their homework, fix them dinner, shove them off to bed because we all have to be up the crack of dawn to do our busy schedules all over again. So what kind of life really is it for them that they're constantly being rushed through life, and yet we have no time for even ourselves? I mean, we were just talking about this the other day. We went snowboarding for a couple hours, 2 hours, and had to hurry up and run back because the mountain, it's 3 to 4 hour drive round trip, and we've got to get back, so the kids got to be picked up by a certain time.
And you would prefer not to have had the kids?
We love them to death, but if we've had to do it all over again, we wouldn't do it because we could pick up go to Reno, go snowboarding down there, go to Tahoe. We can fly to Cal. I travel a lot on business. I'm like, my wife could come with me, but she can't because she's got to stay home, work, and take care of the kids and get them through school. And I travel all over the country quite frequently. I'm like, boy, great if you could have came to... I was just in San Francisco last week. I'm like, it would have been great if you could have came down with me, but she can't.
Yeah.
I was in Reno not that long.
That's true. There are all kinds. You're right. There are all kinds of things you can't do. I'm curious, though, that you have 3 children.
Well, you got to find time for something, I guess. That's the only recreation we get.
Tim, thank you for the call. It's 1-800-5800-TOM. That's our telephone number. Let's say hello to Holly on the Tom Leykis Show for our guest, Kay Hymowitz. Hello.
Hi, my name's Holly, and I'm calling from the Riverside area in California. I have 2 boys with the same man. We've been together for 13 years, and I think it works out just fine. I just recently got a job. I'm back to work after staying home for 6 years with my youngest. And you know what? We are doing just fine. If I ever did get away from him, I do believe that I will let him have what he brought into it. Whatever I brought into it, I would have. And whatever we brought in, accumulated together, we would split down the middle. That's how I feel.
Oh, well, I think that's great. I'm just wondering what you're doing listening to Tom.
You know what? I love Tom, my husband, boyfriend, whatever you want to call him after 13 years, has got me into loving Tom. And Tom, you're right on. And I just want to say you're awesome. And I wish I could live your lifestyle, but I chose a different route. And
I'm going to New York for the weekend, Holly.
You know what? Maybe
for the weekend.
I'm 38, and I'm from upstate New York in Albany, but I relocated when I was 6, so I'm really a California girl. I'm on my way driving somebody back to Palm Springs right now, and I just had to call in because I think you guys are awesome talking about this, because like I said, 3 weeks ago, I just went back to work, and I don't know, the kids are important, but you got to think of yourself first before you can even think of your children. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's how I feel.
Well, except they get sick, and I mean, things come up. Whether you have to,
like that.
They come first in the sense that somebody's got to look after them. They can't manage on their own. So it is true that they cramp your style. There's no question about it. I wouldn't argue for 1 second. And those years where they're most needy are very, very difficult, especially in today's economy. I still wonder where you want to be when all is said and done. When you're at my age, in the late 50s or 60s, and you look back and you say, okay, who's out there? Who cares about me? Because that's going to happen to you, too. It's not just me that this happened to.
You're definitely right, and I thank God right now that my mom and dad are here and take the boys every weekend for me.
Oh, well, what are you complaining about?
I am not, because I just wanted to call in and say, this is my life. And so, anyway... That's all I really wanted to say.
All right, Holly, thank you for that. I appreciate the call. Mike on the Tom Leykis Show for Kay Hymowitz. Hello.
Hello, Tom.
Hello, Mike.
How you doing?
Doing okay.
All right. Hey, hello, Kay. I've just got a few comments. One is it just annoys the crap out of me when people, whether it be, talk show hosts or the Dr. what's her name on AM or anybody else tell you that this is the paradigm you should strive to live for. I've lived my own life, and I've done things when I wanted to and the way I wanted to, and it hasn't been prescribed by anybody else. Now, with some people, because I don't make a lot of money right at the moment, would say, well, you really haven't succeeded, or you really haven't. But that's not how I view it. I've done, I've blown glass when I wanted to, and I made laboratory equipment, and it was a lot of fun. I made really good money when it was fun, and when it started being a job, then I decided to go somewhere else. And a lot of people would say, well, that's not being responsible.
Yeah, and if you had kids, you wouldn't have the option of doing that because it's more important to bring home that paycheck than to do something that's fulfilling. Kay Hymowitz with City Journal. We appreciate her being with us.
The Tom Leykis Show. And now, here he is, Tom Leykis.
Thank you for tuning in to the Tom Leykis Show. This is where America gets together to talk about the issues you really care about. It's a different kind of a radio talk program. We're the radio talk show that is not hosted by a right-wing wacko or a convicted felon. No, I am your host. Write down our telephone number. You're going to need it. It's 1-800-5800-TOM. 1-800-5800-866. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for being part of our program. Here we are together again on the radio. Many of you sent me a piece that originally appeared in a publication called City Journal by Kay Hymowitz. It's called Child Man in the Promised Land, and it got our attention, mine and that of the listeners, because it describes men who Kay says are perpetually adolescent. And when she goes into detail about the people she's talking about, they sounded an awful lot like our listeners. I'm not trying to say that you are perpetually adolescent. I'm saying that's Kay's opinion of you. And we are giving you the opportunity to respond to some of the things she said in the piece. If you haven't seen the piece, you can go to our website, blowmeuptom.com, and check it out and then call in. But even if you're in your car and you can't see it, you'll catch on pretty quickly to what we're talking about here with our guest, Kay Hymowitz. And we really appreciate you being with us on the show, Kay. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
1-800-5800-TOM is our telephone number. Let's say hello here to David on the Tom Leykis show.
David, father.
Son, how are you? Yes, I'm doing great.
By the way, Kay, I read the entire article, so I'm well familiar with what you wrote. I have a question for you. Do you have a degree in psychology, or do you have a Ph.D.? What particular credentials do you have?
I have a degree in English literature.
I see. Okay. Well, I have a degree in psychology. In addition, I'm a physician, board-certified family medicine, so I bring a little bit of experience and training in this area. But I have to tell you, with all of that, you are exactly, and those who follow your ideas are exactly what Tom tries to warn us all about. When I read your article, and Tom read a lot of it at the beginning of the show, but he didn't get to your most important statement towards the end, and I'll just quote for the listeners because he didn't read it. Quote, "For the problem with child men is that they're not very promising husbands and fathers." That's the whole crux of your dilemma, is that these men are not what you want them to be. Would you agree with that?
Well, no. I mean, I would stick by the statement I made. I mean, what makes a good husband and father? What makes a good husband and father? Somebody who is willing to put aside some of his own pleasures for the sake of the family unit. Somebody who is thoughtful about other people, not especially self-involved. Somebody who is capable of really recognizing the needs of other people, of understanding the difference between men and women and trying to compromise those differences, et cetera, et cetera.
By the way, I think my boys understand the difference between men and women, and that's why they want men to live in our own apartments and women to live in their own apartments.
Yeah. Well,
but what you're describing is this ideal person, which is wonderful, and this person who is completely ready and willing to commit in a long-term relationship. But many men, especially men in their 20s, don't want to do that. And isn't that exactly what we want people to do, which is to not enter into commitments who are not ready or who just don't want it?
Well, absolutely. I don't want people to get into situations where they're not capable of handling. And I want to clarify that when I'm talking about delayed marriage or later marriage, I'm not talking about people in their at 23 or 24. I mean, I do think that there's actually some data now to suggest that that's too young. That the guys are generally not ready when they're in their teens and early 20s. However, my question is this: how do you learn to become somebody who is affected by other people, who does want to learn about a woman, learn really her character, her nature, and who wants to adapt.
You certainly don't enter into a marriage prior to being ready.
Well, no. Now, wait a minute. But I'm not suggesting that you marry the first girl that comes along.
But what you are suggesting throughout your article is that eventually you must reach this developmental milestone where you're ready to be married and have kids. And I have to tell you that you're wrong in that information. For some people, yes, getting married and having kids is part of what they need to do for themselves to grow and to develop. But if you read developmental psychologist Erik Erikson, nowhere does it say absolutely that you must be in a marriage to learn to develop intimacy. You can do that with friendships.
Well, and as a matter of fact, it's funny you bring up Erikson, because Erikson is the one who talks about adulthood being defined by generativity.
Yes,
that is
very good.
The interest in the next generation, and the focus.
But you can have an interest in the next generation, like Tom Leykis, and never have had kids.
That is possible. It is very rare.
It is rare. No, this is what's wrong, and this is what I want the listeners to hear. It is rare because there's never been a huge generation of people who have challenged the status quo to be different. I want to spin this a little differently. What about the feminist movement? Finally, there was women who came out and said, we're not just going to stay home, make dinner, wash the clothes, and raise the children. We're going to go out and work. And they bucked the trend, and they became fulfilled, happy people against the agenda of the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. Good for them. Now, here's the men doing their own thing, which is we don't want to be married necessarily. We don't want to ever have kids. I can still develop psychologically as a good person contributing to the world. And yet, here exactly is your article saying, well, they don't make very promising husbands and fathers. Well, that's the whole point. They don't want to be husbands and fathers. And the whole thing about feminism is they do not accept the alternative for men. Your views are exactly what Tom Leykis warns us about.
Okay, a number of points. First, again, let me point to the surveys that I referred to earlier. When you ask young people what do they want in life, what do they see as what's going to provide their lives with meaning, the vast majority say that they want to marry and have children. So, I have no question that there are some people out there that don't, and a lot of them seem to be listening to this radio show, and I understand that. But that's not true for the vast majority of people.
And I disagree with, and for this reason, there are many 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds who simply do not know what they want in the future. What I said I wanted when I was 20 was nothing like what I have right now. Here I am, a physician, in my late 30s, without children, by design, fully happy, contributing to society, very active with my extended family, nieces and nephews, etc. And there are many men who are replicating exactly the same thing. But when I was 20, I was saying, I want to get married and have kids because that's what I thought was expected of me. I didn't even know to challenge that.
Okay, all right. Now, let me address that issue because I think Tom has said something similar, something that implies that, or maybe it was the previous caller, something that implies that the reason people decide to marry and have children is because they're following this expected path that they're not. I think the implication is they're not brave enough or creative enough or thoughtful enough.
Or they get caught in an unplanned pregnancy.
Yeah. Okay. But, again, if we could look at human history, how do people define themselves? How do human beings come to understand themselves? They come to understand themselves through their connection to others, primarily the family.
Because that's the only construct that has been available.
Because that's the only thing that's permanent.
And if I may jump in here, and not to be the least bit facetious, I'm completely serious as a heart attack here. I've gotten to understand myself much better in the years I've lived alone. Spending time thinking, reading, quiet time with no television in the background, no dogs yipping in the background, no women demanding to go to the mall or demanding to go shop for tchotchkes. I have gotten to know myself and enjoy my own company and to personally grow much more by being alone.
Well, you don't.
I agree, Tom, and I would say to you and to everyone that I suspect, and I don't have research to support this, but I suspect the 20-year-old men in the Y2K era are more advanced developmentally than the 20-year-olds of the 60s. Because in the 60s, per this article that Kay wrote, they were all married and having kids. Like you said, Tom, you don't have time to be thinking, developing yourself when you're running around after a job 40, 60 hours a week and kids.
Right. Look, I think you're right about this much. I think that this age that we're living in allows more self-development than the age that my parents, for instance, were living in.
Right.
There wasn't as much freedom, for all kinds of reasons, largely because there wasn't reliable birth control and no legalized abortion, et cetera, that allowed people this kind of ability to both have satisfying sexual lives at the same time that they were not married. I mean, if you wanted to have sex, you had to get married. Reliable sex, you had to get married. That was just the way things were, I think, for understandable reasons. It is true that we don't have those pressures anymore to quite the same extent, and that there are more options for people to explore their interests, to explore their potentials, their talents. I totally agree. But that doesn't mean that then, therefore, family is of negligible importance. You yourself said one of the things you do is you spend a lot of time with your nieces and nephews. Well, okay.
But I don't want any of my own.
Okay, but your brother or sister decided to have children, and look at you're sort of relying on that connection as adding meaning to your life.
But look what David has done. David is getting the benefits of being around children with none of the cost or the responsibilities.
Right, so somebody else should carry those costs and responsibilities, so he doesn't have to do it.
If you can have it done that way, why not?
Well, anybody can.
No, but Kay, the crux of your argument is that it is at least when I've read this article, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll read back to you your article. The heart and soul of your article is that you must achieve this place where you become a good husband and a good father, and you continue to talk about that. That is the important thing, and I just don't see the evidence in psychology, nor do I see that in life. For some, yes, they will get married. Some of these listeners are married. They're happy. They have kids, and to all that Tom Leykis has said, they're in disagreement, and that's great. But you don't have to do that.
I'm going to throw Erickson back at you again, because I never would have thought of bringing him up. But since you did, because I've always relied on Erickson for understanding a lot about development, and his description of the achievement of intimacy as being one of the milestones of becoming an adult is something that Tom and I assume a lot of his listeners absolutely rejects. Intimacy is not terribly important to becoming an adult in his thinking, nor, of course, is generativity. That's completely irrelevant to becoming an adult. Now, we could have this argument about whether that's true or not.
By the way, I don't quite agree with that, because I do believe that intimacy is important. I also happen to believe that your best friend is almost never the person you are married to or living with.
Exactly. You don't understand what Erickson is talking about. He talks about mutually satisfying relationships.
Yeah.
You always pigeonhole that into marriage, and I'm telling you that's simply not true.
But look,
for everyone.
But, for everyone, no, it's not. And we have the free. Look, we live in a society at a technological era that makes it possible for us to live alone and to make choices that human beings didn't used to be able to make. And I'm not somebody who's saying that everybody should do the same thing. But I am saying this much, that society's interest, our interest as a society is in perpetuating this, the goods that we have. So we have to think about the next generation. We have to put our focus on, in terms of policy.
Well, we really don't.
Well, we do, because what are you leaving behind you? Are you saying it doesn't matter whether this culture continues?
It matters to people who have children, and those people should worry about it.
Well, now, wait a minute. So, in other words, you get all the pleasure of this amazingly abundant society you live in, and you don't have any responsibility to keep that going.
I pay taxes. I certainly contribute in a large way. If you could see what I pay in taxes, it's more than the annual salary of most of the people who listen to this show. So I am contributing.
Well, Well, you are contributing taxes. That's true. And
I am paying for the programs that the single mothers are requiring for the little rugrats that they're squirting out. I'm paying for them.
Hey, listen, I'm totally against single motherhood.
What you're doing, Kay, is you're bringing up more arguments to support your overall belief system in life, which is
but that's what we do. That's what we do, Dave. You're doing the same thing. So that's
true.
Not really an argument.
But what you want, though, is for men are vessels to bring happiness to women.
No. That's just not.
We are cash delivery systems.
No, that's totally unfair. I believe that men get a lot of pleasure out of marriage when it's working right, also, and children. So I don't think this is just for women's sake. As I said, you're saying, well, at 20 years old, men don't know what they want. So if they say they want marriage and children, they're just deluding themselves. I don't know. I mean, it'll be an interesting thing to look at interviews with 30-year-olds and see, well, what do you want down the line? I mean, I know a lot of 30-year-old guys because my son is nearing 30, and they all say yes, they do want that eventually. It's true they don't want it now, but they want it eventually.
Do you find it interesting in popular culture how many TV shows contain a group of 3 or 4 or 5 30-something, 35-year-old, 40-year-olds? Seinfeld, whatever, and they're not married to anybody, and they live in apartments, and these shows are phenomenally popular?
Yeah, I think it's terribly interesting. And I've written about it quite extensively, noticed it, I guess, maybe 15, 20 years ago. I was starting to notice that these shows, remember, they used to have sitcoms that were only about married couples and families, right? And then by the time, I guess the first that I remember was something like Mary Tyler Moore, the single woman in the city. That was the beginning of a whole new
Actually,
generation.
don't forget that girl.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's right. She was before Mary Tyler Moore, wasn't she? Yeah, but that was, she wasn't as popular as Mary Tyler Moore. But, look at the people who play those roles. I'm thinking of Seinfeld or Sex and the City. Look, all of those characters, those people have eventually gotten married. I'm not talking about the characters. I'm talking actually about the actors. In other words, the actual people don't actually live those lives forever.
But the fans, and there are people who like that life. The TV show Friends is another example.
Yeah.
I mean, regardless of what the individuals do, many of them get married and then get divorced, too. Now, that's not Seinfeld, and that's not Julia Louis-Dreyfus. But as we look at some of these shows, let's face it, the concepts that are on these programs are very popular. The idea that people live in their own apartment or they live with a same-sex roommate. They go out and have fun, and they go on vacations together.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about marketing, Tom, but I'll bet you know this. How do you get advertisers interested in a show? You tell them that you can bring in a lot of young people with disposable income.
But how would you do that if you weren't relating to something they care about?
And they want to.
You would not attract a large number of 18 to 34-year-old viewers if your show was about a husband and a wife and a couple of kids. Even though you may think there's a lot of people who are 18 to 34 who are married and have kids. 18 to 34 we're talking about. But the way to get 18 to 34-year-olds is to have shows like Friends or Seinfeld.
I totally agree with you. Completely agree with you.
So that tells us something about society.
By the way, you need to occasionally, bring in a wedding, like the one between Chandler and Monica, I guess it was, or Ross and
If you want to keep women watching, and keep in mind that Friends was primarily a chick show in the eyes of most guys. Yeah. Seinfeld never had a wedding or a baby.
No, that's true.
Ever.
Yeah, that's true.
I might add that Frasier also never had a baby.
Never a baby, but they had weddings, didn't they?
There was one wedding, but again, why do they put weddings in the shows? To get women to keep watching.
Okay, so we're admitting here that women are interested in marriage, right?
But men aren't. And if Frasier got married, every man would tune out.
I don't know. I haven't looked at the viewership of Frasier, so I don't really know.
Well, I do recall when Frasier was on opposite Home Improvement, the married people watched Home Improvement.
Is that right?
The single people watched Frasier.
Yeah, interesting.
And that's just the way it is. We'll continue with our guest, Kay Hymowitz. Her piece, in case you're just joining us, her piece is called Child Man in the Promised Land. You can see it on our website. Just go to the link, and it'll take you to cityjournal.org, and you can read the article for yourself, like the last caller did. Or you pretty much know what we're talking about here. You just dial in.
Tom Leykis.
It's the Tom Leykis Show. Illegal in certain countries. And we continue with Kay Hymowitz, contributing editor to City Journal, talking about her piece called Child Man of the Promised Land. Read it. She seems to be talking about people like us. 1-800-5800-TOM is our telephone number. Let us go to a caller who is our longest-running fan. This is Kat in Studio City on the Tom Leykis Show. Hello.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking the call. I want to say that I like Kay very much, but I just disagree with about everything she says. I've always contended that our generation, baby boomer, holds off puberty till 30 and adolescence till 60, and that goes for women as well as men. But I really sort of resent that one contention that, what are you leaving behind, as if the only way to contribute to society and to the future is to pop out a bunch of kids. I find, and I'm way over your demographic now, that the older I get, the happier I am that I made the decision not to marry or have kids, although marriage is, I respect marriage. I just never was interested. And having children, I don't care for children. I don't do anything for children. I don't, I hope that every child in the world is well cared for, loved, and not abused. But I don't see that that's the only way to contribute. That's a very outdated idea to me. I apologize, no offense to Kay. I think she's very bright, but it's just, and it's a contention that just drives me crazy.
Well, so let me respond to that. I don't want to say that that's the only way you can contribute to the future. I suppose Mother Teresa, who did not have children, was very social-minded and future-minded and concerned about the well-being of the earth and so on and so forth. So
yeah, we'd have to put the Pope in there, too, while we're at it. Every Pope.
Yeah, right.
Well, every Pope since the 1600s.
Right. So I really don't want to make that argument, but I will say this, that because I'm talking here on this show to what's a fairly niche group, if I can put it that way. The fact is, the vast majority...
By the way, I hate to interrupt. We are the #1 program among men in Southern California. So would you call that a niche?
No. Let me put it this way. The vast majority of Americans and human beings in general will have children. I mean, that's just a fact.
But fully 20% of our generation has not, married or single. That's
not true.
It's still a minority. Because it means 80% have.
Exactly.
But it's the biggest minority that there are. First of all, we don't need as many children to be born as they did in the more agrarian early days of the 20th century and farther back. Second of all, I just think that, and Tom has brought this up too, I think the law should make it harder for people to be married than to be divorced, and that people should think about what they're doing before they have children. And it's just not something I personally worship, but if people are going to have children, they should really try to raise decent human beings. I don't think I'm getting the bang for my buck for the taxes I pay for the parenting, if I may use that stupid word, the parenting that's going on today. It's just it seems like a big waste of time. And what are you contributing? Are you contributing an Einstein or a Charlie Manson? Whatever the child you have is not necessarily going to be such a great contribution.
We should add here also the recent census statistics that came out, and I know, Kay, you've seen these. For the first time since the census was first taken in 1790, the majority of households in America are headed by a single person. And for the first time since 1790, when they started keeping records, there are more single women than married women.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are a couple of different issues here. One is that those. Let me just address Kat's point. It's Kat, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me address your point about parenting and what kind of generation we're producing. I couldn't agree with you more that people ought to go into marriage and childbearing very mindfully. But whether or not people are producing Einsteins, they are still producing taxpayers who are going to pay for yours and mine medical care and retirement in the future. So there is that. I mean,
actually, that's not true. If we are single and saving and investing, all the money that we are saving that we would have been spending on tchotchkes, visits to IKEA, and all the other things that married people are spending money on. For example, when I am retired, I am not going to be depending on the system to pay for my health care.
Me too.
Because the money I have saved by not being married and giving it to wives is going to be spent on my future medical care.
All right, Tom, you may not be, but most people are. And I do expect to be somewhat reliant on the health system.
I would say if people did it my way, if guys just resisted marriage resolutely and took the money and put it away, everybody who follows my advice would ultimately be well cared for in their old age.
No, by whom?
By themselves.
Take care of them?
By themselves.
Oh, I see. You're going to take care of yourself when you're old.
Or you can afford to bring in the qualified, competent help.
The 20-year-old nurse, huh?
Well, maybe so. I'll tell you what, that's a good idea.
Listen, if any race is to go on, reproduction has to go on. It's just quality would be better than quantity. And all those things like we're raising, so we're all supposed to have a lot of kids so we can have people take care of us when we're old.
No. Come on. That's not fair.
No, I know it's not fair. It's not fair at all, but but it's always heaped on me and people like me. You're selfish. You're this. You're that.
No. I don't argue that. I don't believe that. I really don't.
You're smarter than that.
But I do think you have to recognize that we are dependent as we get older on younger people.
Well, I didn't say that nobody should have kids. I'm just saying that it's not for everybody, and we shouldn't be called names and tried to be made feel guilty because we don't want to have them.
No, and nor do I want that to happen. But I do think, as I said, perhaps too many times already these hours, that we've been here together, that the vast majority of people will want to have children. We are, I believe, biological creatures, Darwinian creatures who want to reproduce. I mean, that's just...
That's true. I just want respect for people who don't want to reproduce.
Of course you do. That's
all. I mean, and if you do want to reproduce, don't bring them into movie theaters and restaurants until they're old enough.
I'm with you there.
Okay?
I'm with you there.
Thank you.
Or first class on the next air flight I take.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, that's it.
Thank you, Kat, for the call. More with our guest, Kay Hymowitz, coming up.
Tom Leykis.
From Hollywood, it's the Tom Leykis Show at 1-800-5800-TOM. Our guest, Kay Hymowitz. She is contributing editor of City Journal. Her piece, Child Man of the Promised Land, is linked on our website, blowmeuptom.com. In it, she describes men who she calls perpetually adolescents. And the men she describes sound a lot like the men who listen to this program. Bill on the Tom Leykis Show for our guest, Kay Hymowitz. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Bill?
Oh, yes. Hi. Hi, Tom.
Yeah.
Hi. First of all, it's an honor to be speaking with you.
Thank you.
And I've been listening to your show religiously for about a year, and I've got to say that today's piece is probably got to be one of the most scintillating pieces I've ever heard on radio so far. And I just had to call in for two reasons why I think it's so good. First of all, your guest, Ms. Hymowitz, and the caller two calls ago, the physician, I thought the exchange between the two of them was just so good. They were both so articulate, issue-driven, well-informed, and I just thought that the exchange they had was so good that I wasn't even sure what side of the camp I fell on, or what side of the coin I fell on with the two. They just had such a great, rich discussion. And second of all, the reason why I enjoyed it so much is because your sense of timing, Tom, is it's so good. You're just you know when to to get involved and when to step back and let the leash run out a little bit. And I just really enjoyed that piece, and I hope you continue to keep up the good work.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Appreciate the call. Adriana on the Tom Leykis Show. Hello.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Great.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine, thanks.
I just wanted to say regarding the caller before last, I completely agree with her that I think both the men and women, and we're not talking a lot about the women's point of view on this, that if you don't want to have kids and you don't want to be a woman to get married and have kids and run a home, you should be okay with that decision. And I feel that these people are being meant to feel bad. And Kate, not to say that that is what your purpose of this article is about or your point of view is about, trying to make people feel bad for their decisions. But I feel like that's the point that's getting across, that if you are not the type of person, man or woman, who wants to be married and start a family, that you should feel bad for that, or you should feel selfish for that decision. And that's my first point, is that I think that we should actually encourage people to wait as long as they possibly can to get married and have kids. Make sure that they are financially stable and mentally stable to have a family and raise a child. Because personally, I think I would like to live in a society where there are less births per year, but at least they're going into homes where these people are ready mentally and financially to support that child 100%, than to be born to young children who cannot support them and depend on their mothers and their grandmothers and society to do so.
Yeah, I totally agree with that latter point. And, most of my work, or a lot of my work over the last few years, has been devoted to the question of how to improve the conditions in which children are born into this world, in which they grow up, which I'm afraid is very much wrapped up in the condition of marriage, because children, for reasons that we can go into, seem to do better when they grow up with their married parents. I mean, there's just so much research at this point to prove that idea. And an idea which would used to be taken for granted, but somehow we need to prove it. At any rate, the research is out there. I agree that we want to see more children growing up in more desirable circumstances. One of the reasons I wrote this article was that I am interested in the condition of marriage and the social arrangements of marriage. And I do think that there are reasons to think that the delayed, very delayed, I'm not talking about the young 20s, I'm talking about the guys in their 30s and so forth, who I do think that delayed marriage can be problematic. It isn't always, but it can be problematic for marriage, and that is one of my purposes in doing it. It's not to make anybody feel guilty if they don't have kids, if they don't marry. It is simply to say that insofar as a society, we have to be concerned about the next generation and how they're growing up. We need to be concerned about marriage.
Okay, well, but another thing is that they do say that it takes a village to raise a child. And I believe that if you are out there in the public or around kids, like the physician said he has his niece and his nephews, if you have young kids in your family or young kids that you're around, if you're setting a good example by how you're living your life, you're going to influence that child. That doesn't mean that you have to have a child yourself and be in a marriage to have an effect on a child in a positive way. I come from a home where my parents are divorced. And for me, it was better that they were not together. And I feel that I grew up better having my parents in separate homes and not seeing them fight. You know what I'm saying? So I just don't think you have to be in this deep, committed, married relationship to be able to have a child and for that child to be brought up in the right way.
Well, again, all I can do is look at the data, look at the studies that have been done, and at this point, there really is no question from the vast majority of the studies that have been done that children are, on average, are better off growing up with their married parents.
By the way, I should point out to you that you'd be surprised. I agree with you that there's a benefit to children if their parents are married. What I say on this program is there's a benefit to children, but there's no benefit to men.
Well, again, I don't have the data right in front of me because I haven't written specifically about the effect on men. But I think there's a lot of questions about that. Men are healthier. They live longer.
Yeah, but you know what? If you are being nagged and harassed and cajoled and told all the things you can't do, I will gladly give up years 77 through 81.
If that's the only kind of relationship you've ever had, Tom, yes, I would agree that might be worth the trade-off. But
there's a lot of guys out there, and if you want to meet them, you head out tonight to your local Hooters, your local bowling alley, your local strip club. You will see all the beaten dogs I'm talking about. Go through the list of people who listen to this program.
Yeah, well, I believe they're out there. I do, but
lots of them.
Yeah, but, again, the studies are out there. Men who are married tend to be healthier, tend to live longer. I can go on and on with all the benefits. But, that is not to say that there aren't happy men who are not married.
1-800-5800-TOM is our telephone number. Let's say hello here. Boy, there's so many of these calls here. Let's say hello here to Chad in Portland, Oregon, home of the other white meat on the Tom Leykis Show. Hello.
Hello, and good evening to you both.
Hi.
Good evening.
Hey, I am just curious if you have considered that all of your research is based on statistics and such that have been gathered by surveys, and the people you describe you're considering irresponsible, and those are exactly the type of people that may not even care or bother to take the time to fill out such surveys, and it seems to me that that would skew your research heavily.
Well, this is not, I don't do that kind of research. I rely on other people's research, and these are peer-reviewed studies that are, looked at by social scientists, and, they look very carefully.
He brings up a very interesting point, though. Here in the radio business, without getting too specific, because I don't want to get in trouble, we survey the audience to see how many people are listening. And there has been a real problem counting the missing guys you're talking about in your piece, the men 18 to 34. They seem to have disappeared. So it's entirely possible when you say that so many of these men want to get married, want to have children, that a large number of them have not been heard from because you can't reach them.
Well, I mentioned that in the piece, by the way, that marketers have often found this demographic group to be extremely difficult to tap into. That's why the rise of let's say, the Cartoon Network, the Comedy Central.
Well, they're not hard to tap into if you give them what they want. They're hard to tap into. When you give them Ozzie and Harriet, they're not going to watch that.
Right. No, I totally agree with you about that. And that's one of the things that I try to do in the article is just to show how there's been an explosion in entertainment possibilities for this age group, and these companies have something like Comedy Central, which is I think about 2/3 of the viewers are men. It's been quite successful, largely because they've figured out what guys want.
And I think YouTube has found men, and I think Facebook has found men, 18 to 34.
Yeah.
The reason men 18 to 34 are not being found is because they don't have landlines. They're on cell phones, which are frequently not used for surveys of the kind you're talking about.
Well, again, the surveys
and they don't respond to surveys, especially when the surveys are about things they don't care about.
Well, no, wait a minute. The surveys I'm talking about are surveys that are the national. I don't have the names of the organizations in mind at the tip of my tongue, I'm afraid, because I didn't realize this was going to come up. But these are surveys that are done. These are nationally weighted surveys.
I understand that, but first you have to have people responding to the surveys.
The Tom Leykis Show. Tom Leykis Show. Tom Leykis Show. Tom Leykis Show. Tom Leykis